how to acquire a skill that will lead you to PR in Australia. What is the skill assessment about actually?
Not all skills are in demand and not all skills are being invited to apply for PR as well.
One important thing that the student visa holders must really be knowledgeable about. What is that? What would be the first step if a student is going to go through a skill migration?
It has over 30,000 other software engineers waiting for PR.
Welcome to episode 2 of Visa Game Plan. Today, the episode is going to be about understanding if your skill is already on the in-demand list, or if it's not, how to acquire a skill that will lead you to PR in Australia. We have our immigration solicitor, Keith James, with me today. How are you, Keith?
Hi, Amasha. I'm very well and very excited to be here today with you. What are we going to chat about?
Okay, so today we are going to chat about understanding how students can decide if the skill that they're studying for or the qualification they have would lead to PR through skill migration. So, which is basically understanding if their occupation is in the demand list for Australian PR pathway.
Yep. So basically, I think students becoming permanent residents is a very popular pathway to Australia. A lot of students come to Australia to study something, then they go on to their 485 visa, which is known as the TR visa. Usually it's a 2-year work visa post-study. And then from there, they look to apply for skill migration.
So basically, when clients come into Australia on a student visa, there are so many things that they have to consider. But amidst that, there's one important thing that the student visa holders must really be knowledgeable about. What is that?
That's whether or not this course that you're studying is going to lead to a skill assessment.
That's
Right?
basically to see if it is on the skilled occupation list.
Yes, that's two parts actually. I think the
Right.
first part is to see whether or not the course you're studying leads to a skill on the skilled occupation list.
Right.
And the second part is whether the course you're studying alone is sufficient to get a skill assessment, or whether you need some post-qualification work experience as well. And that's quite a complex decision to make, particularly when you're on a student visa.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the skilled occupation list. What is the skilled occupation list, and how can clients really identify if the skill they are studying for or the occupation that they are employed in is actually in the skilled occupation list?
So the skilled occupation list is a list that's compiled by the Australian government that has all the occupations that the data suggests is in shortage in Australia. So the first thing to do is to figure out whether your studies will lead to a skill assessment on that list, like I said before. But the second thing to do is to see whether that skill is actually in demand, because
Right.
there's over 500 skills on that list, and not all skills are in demand and not all skills are being invited to apply for PR as well.
Right. So basically, when students come into Australia, they come to study several courses. Now, let's say they come to study commerce bachelor's or like masters of HR. Do you think all these courses would lead to PR, or they have PR chances, or is there any distinction?
Not really. So basically, what Australia is looking for at the moment is some very specific skill sets, right? So if you are doing more of a managerial type of course, or your background is more to do in the accounts and commerce field, I think the chances of getting permanent residency is very low now. I think the chances of actually getting PR is around the healthcare sector, the building construction sector, the social services sector, and the education sector. So if you're somebody with skills in those sectors, the chances of getting invited for PR is very, very high. But if you're in the more general management, like as you said, human resources, accounts, that's going to be pretty tough. Even IT, I think, has become quite a difficult occupation to get PR in, because so the Australian government has something known as the EOI dashboard, which has the data for all migrants who have lodged expressions of interest. If you go to the EOI dashboard, and particularly if you look at things like the IT occupations, like software engineering has over 30,000 other software engineers waiting for PR.
I see.
Right? So if you get a software engineering skill, all you're doing is just adding yourself into that list and not really having a way to differentiate.
That sounds very competitive.
It's very difficult these days. Like
Yes.
it is very hard, because while you're on your student visa, as I said, you should really think not only whether your course is going to lead to a skill assessment, but also whether your course is going to kind of lead to a skill assessment in an occupation in demand.
Understood. So basically, since we are actually talking about the skill migration aspects of things, what would be the first step if a student is going to go through a skill migration?
I think the first step is to identify whether your occupation's on the list, right? So now, if you come to Australia, let's say to study a Bachelor of Commerce or even a Bachelor of Science, any general qualification, what I would be doing is figuring out whether that course leads to a skill assessment and what are the skill assessment requirements. If not, Australia has a rule that says after 6 months of studying your principal qualification, you can change your qualification to something else.
What is the skill assessment about, actually?
Well, a skill assessment is the Australian government's way of assessing whether your education and or work experience requirement has the ability for you to or whether your education and work experience requirements meets the standards of an Australian qualified person in that occupation.
So, which means I've heard that some skill assessments you can directly get after you study the course, but some require work experience.
That's correct. So there are very handful of occupations where just the education alone leads to a skill assessment.
Right.
But a vast majority of the occupations require 1 year of post-qualification work experience. So let's start with the courses that have qualification only requirements to get a skill assessment. There are a handful. So you can do accounts. So if you study a Bachelor of Accounting or a Master's of Accounting, as long as it's accredited by CPA or IPA, you will be able to just have 7 each band IELTS or PTE and then directly get a skill assessment as an accountant. Then you can do it in teaching, early childcare teaching or secondary school teaching. You can do social work or you can do nursing. Those are a few handful of occupations where just the education, even engineering, the education alone leads to a skill assessment.
Right, okay.
But all the other occupations require 1 year of post-qualification work
Is it
experience.
more like trade occupations like carpenters?
Correct. So trade occupations, any occupation assessed by this body called VET assess. Basically, you need to do your qualification and then you need to work for 12 months.
Right, okay. So, since we have that understanding now, I would really like to know when a client comes to MJ Legal, how would a daily consultation for you or strategizing a pathway for a client through the skill migration aspect would look like?
So in most months, we consult with more than 30 clients, right? So all of our consultations are paid consultations, which means we really take the time to research the client's background, understand what the client's requirement is, and then have a Zoom consultation. The reason I like to do the consultation on Zoom is because that way I can share my screen because we prepare a presentation for the client.
I
'Cause
see.
each client is unique, and most migration agencies or places that do free consultations don't have the time because all they can give you is 5 or 10 minutes. They can listen to two things about yourself and they'll give you a template answer. But we don't do that. We take the time because we know each person's migration journey is unique and we also know that the competition is very high. So you can no longer afford to just have one templated pathway and follow it, right? So at MJ Legal, what I do usually is we take the time to understand your education background. We take the time to understand what your career aspirations are and then see whether those two can be reconciled with the skill migration pathway requirement, with the Australian government's pathway requirement. And then I'll give you an advice on whether your current course can lead to PR, whether you should change the course, whether you should move interstate, whether you should ask your employer to sponsor you. And I will give you a strategic guidance, particularly because the 485 is only 2 years long, right?
Only 2 years.
So that 24 months is going to go by very fast.
So, which means MJ Legal takes a more personalized or a more customized approach when it comes to giving that advice. So, I'm sure when it comes to consultations, you get clients who are on their 500s and also clients who are in the latter part of their 485, which is terrible. How do you help clients like that? Is there really a solution for clients like that through skill migration?
I think if clients come to see us when they are on their student visa, life is pretty easy. We can really guide them properly. But if you come to us like in the last 6 months of your 485, that's when I really have to put in a lot of work to advise those clients because there's very few options available, right?
Correct.
And it often looks like either an employer sponsored visa, an offshore student visa, or in some instances, a partner visa.
So now we looked at you told me that not all courses would lead to PR or would not help you get a skill assessment. Do you think there are differences when you study in metropolitan areas and let's say regional areas? Is there a distinction or about moving interstate? What's the whole thing behind that?
I think studying regionally versus studying in a metropolitan area has a lot of differences because, particularly if you study regionally on a student visa, then you really have the ability to get an extra year on your 485. But if you study in a metropolitan area like Melbourne, Sydney, or Brisbane, you only get a 2 year 485. So that's the main distinction. You also get some additional points for studying regionally, but I would say the main benefit of studying regionally is that extra year of the 485.
That was very exciting information, Kate. That was really comprehensive. I think our clients really got to understand the differences of occupations being on the skill list and how they can maximize their points. It was very, very comprehensive. Thank you. Thank you for all the information today. Hoping to see you in another episode.
Certainly.
That's it for episode 2 of Visa Game Plan. Hoping to see you guys in another episode.